This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Rhonda Parker Taylor. Welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
Great. Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited about talking tonight and engaging with you and your audience.
Well, thank you again for being on the show. We let people know you can see that icon on the top says listen on Newsly. We are a featured podcast on that platform. That's an audio only platform. And for those of you who are listening or watching, if you use that coupon code GHOST, you can check that out for 30 days free if you use that coupon code GHOST. But we will be on Newsly later tonight. I want to let people know we're actually at episode 1030 with this episode of the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast, tracking out since 2016 on Apple Podcast. And we do have your website, rhondaparkertaylor.com. That will be fully clickable when we're published on almost all the platforms you can watch or listen to podcast on. So if people click on that, they can get to your books or how to purchase your books from that website.
Yes, they should be able to do all purchase linked. And congratulations on 1030 episodes. That is just absolutely phenomenal. You are just a rocker, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been doing it a while. Yeah, it's just it's something we've been doing since 2016, but it's interesting. It's just podcasting is a whole new area. I'm a musician, I'm a podcaster, and I'm a software designer. So I got a lot of hats. But
Oh,
it's just I like the format because I get to talk to people from all over the world. And I was doing it before the pandemic. Like I said, back in 2016, we started the podcast. So it's just cool to be still out here. But you are an American writer, entrepreneur, and academic researcher. And maybe you want to give a little bit more information about your background to the audience, kind of introduce yourself, and then we can talk about your story and all your latest work.
sure. So, just like you, I have many hats. I academically, I worked my way from bachelor's to actually associates first, all the way up to a doctorate. And I have been in academics for a couple of decades now. Started with teaching at the college level. And I really found that what I was missing was some of the creativity that happens in real life, being able to take those real life lessons that you learn and apply them also, and not only in academics where you're teaching, but also in a storytelling way that actually reaches people. And not that academics doesn't, because it does, but it's different. It's very
Yeah,
different.
it's different.
The learner is wanting something, but they're wanting the degree. It's different when the lessons are learned through a creative process. I'm also the daughter of a first generation immigrant from Poland, and I'm from a small town in Indiana. Hey, Noblesville, if there's anybody out there, which was very, very small, but it's in Hamilton County, just north of Indianapolis. And so what I really like to say is people should never sell themselves short. They should
Mhm.
always follow their dreams, always, because when you follow your dreams, no matter how far you get into it, that exploration just really fulfills a positivity within your soul.
Yeah, because what I find is a lot of things I'm doing in my life is like, I went to college in Maine. I'm a New Englander. I live in New Hampshire. We're in New Hampshire right now. But I went to school for sociology, but I'm a software designer.
Yeah.
Right. So it shows you that you don't necessarily have to take what you did with your degree and become. And the reason I got into software design just because like as a hobby, I was like kind of playing with all the nerds in college that were just making their own video games and stuff. And I didn't like the traditional courses because
Right.
what I saw was the kids who were doing it on their own, we had more fun. And
Right.
we weren't building like corporate things. We were building like trying to match what was in the video game parlor. What was at the arcade. We were just trying to build stuff that we wanted to do. And,
Right.
and because and the same thing with music, I got into music. I just got a synthesizer when I was 17 and I just learned how to use it because I owned it. I said, well, if I own it, then I can play with it. Then
Right.
I can figure it out. And so a lot of my life has been figuring things out without necessarily having the credentials,
Right.
but getting into the space anyway. So yeah, it's interesting with how you were said. It's like sometimes you want to just be I'm a creative,
Right.
so I kind of cross lanes, and sometimes it seems like people discourage that kind of creativity. They want people just to learn facts or learn things without, well, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to process that in your life and figure out how to actually apply it in some way that you're actually going to be consistent and want to do it?
Right. So for me, similar, but a little bit different. Um, I was never academically strong. So my journey was to prove that I could be.
Oh,
But what I found, and I love the soft skills. My doctorate's in business. I've got an MBA and then and a BSM and then the doctorate in business. And I didn't like numbers. Now, how do you go into business but you don't like numbers? But
yeah.
that's where
If,
I started exploring the soft skills. And I
mhm,
realized that the journey of the academics was to prove that I could do it. And obviously I wanted to be able to make a good living. And in teaching, you're stable and it's a good environment. And loved people. I've always loved people. When I was a kid, I was the one that was the chatterbox. I wanted to socialize more than I wanted to learn. And so I found, for me, the journey was both. I like to be a storyteller. I come from I'm going to say, a line of storytellers. And that's why the writing is so wonderful for me, because it allows me to weed a story that I've thought of and explored. But the research comes into play, because with my research, I can do anything. I can learn about how to do an autopsy. I can learn about how police
mhm.
officer protocols are, what the law is. So I'm able to do both because I took the time to do the academic journey. But that was a self goal for me.
Mhm.
Some people want to make lots of money and that's their goal, and that's where they go. Mine was, I wanted to be educated. And I can remember one time a professor told me, and it was kind of a half back slap, and at the same time a compliment. And it was one of those. It was like an econ class where I just had to struggle and make sure I
Well,
understood
the
it.
charts.
Yeah, exactly. And as I was walking out of the classroom, and he had just read the paper, he said, "You're smarter than you sound." What does that mean? Well, I
What's
was
that
from a
mean?
small town. I was a hick.
Yeah, yeah. We can't go by the accent. That's not how you measure intelligence, but I guess he's a professor, so whatever.
Right,
But
exactly. So I found through my journey, though, sometimes even the smallest of things can be taken either positively or negatively. I took that as a positive. And then
mhm.
I knew what I needed to work on next.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
needed to work on my communication with others, so it wasn't so informal.
Oh, yeah. Because maybe you have that kinda effect where you're like, it's not really measuring your intellect, but the people are making assumptions because the way
Exactly.
you're talking, the way you're speaking. And
Exactly.
yeah, I think the tools, like what I liked about the tools, I like again a bachelor's degree from like Bowdoin College back in Maine, and I had a double major of like political science and sociology. But what it taught me was like how to research. I had to write papers. I had to write theses. I
Right.
had to go and figure out how to learn. And basically, the holistic kind of Socratic method that they teach there is like a lot of the exams were all blue book.
Right.
Not multiple choice. You had to kind of show your professor that you understood what he taught and then put it in your own words and kind of read it back to him, showing that you actually understood it and you could apply it.
Right.
But the
Exactly.
thing sometimes people don't learn that way. They learn multiple choice and but they don't actually learn like how do you actually apply that,
Hmm.
and actually learn how to learn. The whole
Right.
point of that thing was in those the type of work I do as a software designer, I have to learn new technology all the time. So it's
Right.
like going to school. So every in software, it's exponential. We go
Right.
from one tech to another, and we have to kind of like throw out the mainframe, and now we're in blockchain, we're now into AI. We're learning new paradigms all the time, and so you
And don't
can't
you
be
know that's life,
comfortable.
isn't it?
We,
Isn't
we
that life
can't be
too?
comfortable.
Yeah. Because, if you're not a life learner, you get, not only do you get behind the times, but it's not always about that. When you're not a life learner, you don't always comprehend the processes being used.
Mm.
So, whether it be software or dealing with relationships or writing, or, for me, whether it be, a problem that we're trying to solve in academic research, it's all about being able to apply certain steps. What is the problem? How do you define the problem? What are you going to do about the problem? What's the alternatives for solving that problem? Those are normal everyday processes that have to that are required for you to make any decision in life.
Yeah, I mean, what I do in software is called business analysis. So
Mm-hmm.
we look at the business problem. We create a use case or
Right.
a user story, and
Right.
then we don't care about what tech we're going to use. We put it kind of in a in this type of language that's logical. Like the user story and the use case is saying, here's an actor, here's the system, here's the interactions, here's the context of what the problem is. And then we can say, hey, you could go and use many technologies to solve this, but what's the best option? So we'll give people multiple options on how to solve the problem, but we'll put the problem from a business perspective.
Right.
It has
Exactly.
some logic to it, but it isn't code. It's like pseudo code. It's
Right.
not really, and then the programmers actually code it, but I figure out how it should be presented or understood from the stakeholders. And so
Right.
that really is kind of like what you do in college. Is like
Right.
it's writing research papers all the time.
Right.
you know.
It definitely is. And you know what? You probably can apply that to your music too.
Yeah, I do.
Because you have to start with a message or a problem that you're talking about, and then put the chords and the notes and the themes that you want to present to your listeners. So same thing, how do you want it to work? How do you want the world that you're describing to work?
Yeah, and I think one of the things I forgot to talk about is like we're going to talk about like the role of vulnerability in becoming an author, an entrepreneur, or a creator. In terms of like, I think that's the creative type of people are kind of in that zone. If you're an author or an entrepreneur, you're probably a creator. But
Hmm.
what I find is a lot of times, as an artist, is as a musician or a painter or somebody who does video work, it's the vulnerability that you access that gives your work kind of authenticity as an artist. Like if you write something and it feels like you're giving up some part of yourself that kind of you're it seems more honest than if you're
Right.
just trying to make something that's like a just a jingle. I'm just
Yes.
writing a jingle that's really, it's catchy, but does it have any deeper meaning? Is it really going to affect you, make you cry like a Karen Carpenter or something? Is it really
Right.
going to pull your
I,
emotions? Or are you just kind of doing something matter of fact?
I used to play the Carpenters when I was younger on the piano all the time. That was one of my favorite things to do. Um, Vulnerability. You said a very key word. When I wrote Crossroads, my debut novel, I wrote it and then I printed it so I wouldn't lose it. And I had it saved in a couple of spots and everything. And one day I went to go look at another document that was on the same disc, and that other document had been corrupted. And
Oh,
I looked over where I had printed the novel, and I had images of me having to retype it, re-edit it, everything, because if the other file had gotten corrupted, then that's the predicament I would be in. So of course I saved it all over the place, but then I was telling my sister that the story, just like I told you in your audience, and she said, "What are you afraid of? Why aren't you publishing?"
hmm.
And
Mhm.
I said, well, I don't know. I just, I've been so busy and dad was sick and this and that. And she said, you're afraid to be vulnerable. And you did a very key thing with that, just that one thought. So many times the fear of letting go and letting someone else see it or hear your dream, or have even a moment that they could criticize something, paralyzes people from their true gift.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big problem.
It's
We find it a lot of times as like, I do production work with people, and a lot of people they'll come to me. They either, they know my production style and they're trying to impress me, and they basically try to clone what I sound like. Like, well, you don't need to clone me because I already have work, right?
right.
So I want to hear something. Well, I'll go back to them and say, why don't you show me the piece that you're scared to show anybody? Rather than trying to show me that you can play like me or you can sound
Right.
like whoever's in the top 20. And that's a hard thing because people do have that stuff, but they're scared to show it. Even professional musicians will try to like, well, I'll just try to do what's hip. I'll try to do what somebody else is doing. And say, why don't you actually show me what you do naturally and are kind of scared of? And let's work on making that the most authentic, best version of yourself.
Now
And that's
that's
a hard thing to do because you get people who do it. You get the David Bowies, you get the Hendrixes, you get the Dylans, but most people don't do that.
right.
Most people try to clone somebody else. They
And
try to copy somebody else.
I think that's so true, because we are taught from a very young age, when you think about it, that even whether it be cursive or whether it be whatever, you model what works and you don't step out of the box. You model what's working. Well, if you're modeling, that's good because you learn the basics, but it
Mhm.
doesn't take you out to inventing or creating something fresh, new, whether it be a product. If someone's out there that's a business person and they're working on products, yes, it's good to do the incremental 10% better. But why aren't we thinking of more challenging
Yeah,
problems
yeah,
to
radically different.
right,
You get once in a while, you get like, like yeah, well, Tesla's kind of, in the news for different reasons, but they do very radical designs. Like
right. Yeah, I
Apple
saw
does
the
very.
robot today.
Yeah, like they do the like Apple is famous for doing like PCs were kind of certain type of thing. The more like IBM version, like the business version, and they did more artistic version. Even today, their computers are more from an arty perspective. They seem like more like an artist or designed it than
Right,
an actuary or an engineer designed it. It's more like an artist designed it. And so you get the idea like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini compared
right,
to like a regular car. It's like, well, it looks like an artist did that, like a Da Vinci, like somebody who wants to have some style. And that's
right,
not normal. Like most people don't try to put that kind of bleeding edge, cutting edge into something because they rather stay safe and to
right.
stay in the box. And it's really when you cut in the problem with being on the bleeding edge, you get the vulnerability. People, a lot of people are going to probably say they hate it because they never seen it before or they never heard it before. And so as soon as you do something that steps out of the box, people in the canon will say, "Well, that's not what we normally see." So
Right.
they immediately say it's no good.
Right. I remember when I went to my first writing conference, and I'd already written my novel, and you could submit the first three chapters, and they would read it and they'd make recommendations and give out awards or whatever. And the first thing that they said to me, and they said, what what genre are you actually going, you have to write,
Yeah,
you're writing what
what you're
genre. And i'm
referring
like
to.
i'm like well, it's fiction. And they said, well, but which one? Because I was new at it, and I was like, well, I would probably rate it more of a suspense. And they said, then that first chapter, you have to do this. And I had to think about it, because it is my genre the right genre for me then, and then I
Mhm.
thought about it, and I was like, I know what I need to do. And it was just a very easy change. And I'm like, a dead body has to be dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and it, my form of suspense is more like a game of Clue.
Mm-hmm. It's a different type.
It's more like an Agatha Christie versus a Grisham or a
Like a
um,
Columbo
yeah,
TV
or
show.
Koontz, or I mean, I love reading them, but my detail is that's not what I like. It's not
Mm-hmm.
that the Stephen King, you know, his details phenomenal. I didn't want to copy that. What I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about the people.
Oh, the people, so more of a people focused, dialogue focused.
Yes. What's
Yeah.
their motivation? What's their emotions? Why are they doing this? So it's still a crime novel, but it deals with the emotions of anger, fury, and envy. And
Yeah,
all
I
of
think
those
this,
can
yeah.
cause a crime, you
Well,
know, and
there's a place for everything, like within a subgenre. It's like, but people always want you to be like an exact genre, and maybe you have a like a little bit of a subgenre,
right.
and that's always the rub because people always say, well, you got to change everything, you
I
know.
just wanted them to. I wanted people to think. If they read
Yeah.
it, I wanted them to think about where do you where do you fit in this picture? Even though they're talking about a main character,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted them to realize that hey, sometimes I'm jealous. You know, and I. What if I took that jealousy too far? Or maybe sometimes a little. I'm angry. What if I took that too far?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm furious. You know, we all are capable of good and bad things. And I
Yeah.
wanted them to see the humanity in decisions that we make. You know, whether it be in one of the characters who he's a sub character, his name's Billy, but he'd known this guy all his life, and he decides to go on a ride, and that ride ends up, you know, not being the ride he should be involved in. And
Mm-hmm.
how many times could one decision
A
in
cascade into a
life.
bunch of other things. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, you know, I really wanted people to stay focused not only on the book but on their own emotions and feelings and how they navigate the world.
That's interesting, because as a songwriter, I don't have as big a world,
Right.
because our world maybe at the most, sometimes we have long songs that go 10 minutes or something, but
Right.
most of the time it's we're like 3 to 5 minutes. And so we try to create a world or a story that completes in 5 minutes.
And that story is important in songs because that's the hook.
Yeah, it's the hook. Yeah,
It's
you
what
want
gets that heart pumping and makes you want to listen and be active in the song.
well, you want to create characters, like you want to
Mhm.
create story, you want to have like a vision. So you kind of build in a world. You're trying to build in a tone. Is it melancholy? Is it funky? Is it sad? Is it regretful? Whatever. You build that kind of tone, and you can. The thing with music, like I can have pianos that could echo, you know, like something that's melancholy. I could have a
Right.
guitar that can, or a saxophone. You can have the instrument create that feeling that can kind of channel that feeling. But then the person who listens, they're going to take your words and reinterpret it. So you can have this overall vision, but if it's wide enough, everybody who listens to it's going to get have their own interpretation of
Right.
what you did. And so once you put it out there, they own it. But
Yeah, basically off their experience. Because we would all like to say, "Oh, well, all of our experiences are the same, and we all think the same." No, we don't. We have such diverse thoughts and patterns and feelings that they'll pick that song or that writing, and they'll make it their own.
yeah, because what happens is like I always feel like songs can be sound paintings, or they can be like
Hmm.
soundscapes, or like sound movies. And so when somebody hears it within that person's individual mind or subconscious or who they are, it brings up different visions for them.
Right.
Like if I listen to a Karen Carpenter song from '74, I remember where I was, and I might pull up a vision that has nothing to do with the direct lyrics, but it triggered like a picture in my mind.
Right.
And that's like the personal thing that each individual gets out of that piece of music. It pulls that picture. And the same thing I think with writing. When people start getting into your world of your
Mhm.
crime or your story, it
Right.
pulls things up in there. Some guys, oh, this seems familiar. I've experienced this. I understand this character. I understand the protagonist. I understand the antagonist. It's like I've seen this kind of person before, and so
Right.
they'll start to bring those things up, and that's how you get pulled in, and people get drawn in because they feel the connection.
Right. Exactly. And that connection, when done organically like that, where you've created a story, not only leaves a lesson for a person, but it just like when you were sitting there talking, and then you'd mentioned the Carpenters. I All of a sudden the song, that image comes back, and the one that came first was "When I Was Young, I Listened to the Radio," and I can remember me sitting there in my mom and dad's home, about 16 or 17 years old, playing it on the piano, and that's what creativity is all about, is leaving some image. For me in Crossroads, like I said, I explored the three emotions, but what I left, the final thought in it was, yes, anger is cruel, which is a proverb. Fury is overwhelming, and we all know when you're furious, it takes over your whole body.
Hmm.
But who can stand before jealousy? Envy makes the bones rot.
Yeah, that's
That's
definite.
and right there, that you think of all the times, anytime someone's been jealous, or just a little bit, insecure because someone else may have something more than they did do or whatever, it destroys the relationships.
Yeah, because it's like you just can't. A lot of people can't just let it be.
Right.
Because the one thing is, if you're creative, what you try to do is like if you feel these things, you try to turn it into art. Like
Right.
so but if you don't have an outlet, do you turn it into bad actions and bad words that ruin the relationship or show you there's like a disconnect? So
Right.
so you try to think of like the law of attraction, because I'm a
And
Buddhist. But I try
right.
to think of things that will be if I live a positive life, then positivity will happen. Like
Exactly. And
if I
that's
put out
and
those kind of vibes, then but if I put out jealous vibes, then I'm gonna get back like the
jealous
same
and
type of thing.
anger, and how many times in whatever business you're in, it doesn't matter. You're in music and you're in technology, and your audience members, you probably have a little bit of everything: doctors, lawyers, someone that's a homemaker, whatever you are, just be the best version of you and love that version of you. Like you said, if you bring positivity into your world and into other people, and you breathe that into them, then be prepared, because it's going to come back. It's going to come back tenfold. But if you're breeding negativity, jealousy, anger, whatever it might be, and tripping people in the hall before they get to the break room or to their meeting, whatever you're breeding, it comes back tenfold also. So that's what's going to happen to you.
But it's also like you were saying, like people don't take like if you spend all your time being like jealous of somebody else's work, and then you say, "Well, I've got all these ideas," but then you never put them out. Like
Right.
if you I've talked to like a painter, go to their loft, and then they got all these paintings. I was like, "These are awesome. Have you put them in the gallery?" And they were like, "Oh, I'm not good enough." Like, well, it looks good enough to me, but if
Right.
you don't believe it, then you never put it into the gallery. Nobody ever gets to know who you are, except your friends who walk into your loft and see it and tell you, why aren't you showing it?"
Right.
And that's kind of where, like, a lot of people, like when they finally reach that moment, it's like, "Man, why not put it into the world?"
Exactly. And if let's stay on the grain of thinking of art. We're creating art, you and your music, and me and my writing, but think of a nice colorful flower that each petal is a different color. And then add to it, what is it that makes you whole? Mindfulness,
Mhm.
resilience, purpose, kindness, self care relationships, and each one of them a different color, and then put that out to yourself and to others, and look at the world you would create. It'd be full of every color and every beautiful concept there is. Try to do that. A practice that I try to do daily is, and some people say it's like letting the light in when you open up the blinds, but I try to go to
Mhm.
each window in my home. I live on 3 acres. It does a lot of things for me. One, it makes me look at my world from different perspectives. I see the beauty in the, in the world, and then the critters and whatever I see in each window. But it also reminds me of how important daily functions of life are to make sure you're still functioning. What if I see a tree branch has fallen? What if I see, something? I can address the issues before they become big issues.
Mhm. Yeah, bear
So
awareness of the world. Yeah.
yes, awareness, because if you don't have awareness, and what I found, like, maybe I was doing a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when I wrote Crossroads, probably wasn't as aware as I am today. I've really put practice and life balance and doing that. But what I found is that awareness, if you don't have it, all kinds of things can happen.
Mhm.
People can take advantage of you. People
Yeah.
can you can miss a detail that's very important. Maybe it's financial, maybe it's just a detail in a relationship where you're just not paying the attention that it needs to be. All that. Being self-aware allows you to not learn only about yourself, but learning from others, because you start paying attention.
Yeah, like, as a musician, one of the things is like when you play in a group is you get this kind of situational awareness from your listening skills. Like you
Right.
listen to every member of the band, and I'm the keyboard player, and there's a drummer, there's a bass player, there's a horn player, and we play kind of like jazz. But what we can do is we might not even practice that piece before, but we could
Mhm.
play it live in front of an audience if we trust each other and we listen and kind of feel the kind of like you kind of trust that you're gonna go with that kind of flow state. And
Right.
so like a lot of us who do the jazz is like you can live within some kind of like paradigm of what it should be, but you can take whatever note, and there's no bad note. There's just like I can use that note, a so-called bad note, as an opportunity. And so
Right.
if I hear a note I didn't expect, I can go with it and take all my knowledge as a musician and say, well, I know what chords to go with that, so why not? I'll just put it together. And in that moment, you have this very organic thing that happens in real time. It's very authentic, and it's not like a classical piece that's like known. It's kind of this unknown, and it's fun to kind of live on that unknown because you're like you're not going to fail, but you don't know exactly where you're going. You kind of have an idea, but you kind of flow with it. And
Hmm.
it's like life, like you don't necessarily know everything that's going to happen. Are you going to be able to handle those things that are unexpected?
Yeah, it's almost sounds like to me, because although I have played the piano, I've mentioned it, and I did it for several years when in my younger years. I'm not fluent like you, but it almost sounds like you're creating not only with the people that you're working with, but a meaningful relationship through those notes and those words and those melodies and those lyrics, because like you said, that trust has to be there, and trust is the foundation of any relationship. So you're getting a vibe between them. I can only imagine the fear if you don't have a good vibe and a good
Yeah,
and
yeah,
trust there.
yeah.
Oh my
That's the
goodness,
thing.
that would be awful.
But if you're in a group and the guy's asking for the chord charts, he's
Hmm.
asking for what key it is, then we're all looking. It's like, well, typically in this kind of group, we don't even say that. We just kind of
Right.
know. So
Yeah.
you got the guy that doesn't even have the right vibe, but he keeps on asking, like, well, what key are we in? What BPM are we in? What it's like no, it's like you don't feel it.
Right.
I guess you might not be the right guy.
Right. Exactly. And you would have to, know each other's accomplishments probably too well enough to know, okay, I can work with you, because that
Yeah.
would be hard.
But it's
But
hard. It's just kind of like a feel-based thing. Like you kind of feel people, and it's just like a vibe. It's like
right,
you get the vibe. It's like this guy's gonna know when I play this chord what to go with it.
right,
You know, and the drummer kind of knows if I play this chord, then they go with the bass player. It just is this thing. It's like you get to know through experience which people are comfortable with that kind of scenario, and which people have to have the chord chart, have to know, have to have the
or
sheet
chart,
music, and
or chart.
they got to know what it is. So it's okay. It's like if I know that that's the kind of person I'm working with, and we're working on a particular project, it's okay. I'm not going to stress this person out because I
No,
know who they are, and I know they need the chord chart, and they know they need. So it's kind of the situational awareness and
right,
listening skills and body language. They can say, "Well, this guy's uncomfortable.
right,
This person's like they don't feel. They're not feeling it." So it's like,
right,
okay, we're not going to put that person through that if they can't handle it. You know,
right.
so
I get that. That would be very difficult to working that way too. And so many people probably don't realize that about music. You know, the importance of that, because it seems so fluid and so easy to the listener's ear. You
yeah.
know, um, same
It's
thing with
easier
rock
than it looks.
and roll.
It's a lot of practice. It's like an
Right.
athlete practicing that 3-point shot or a
Right.
play, like on a football team. It's like practicing that play, and it looks like it's automatic. Well, it's all that practice. Like we've done so much practice, like 10,000 hours probably on
Mm-hmm.
every guy that's done it, every person that's in it, and it's just automatic. There's like a
Right.
lot of stuff that's just like high-end coordination with your instrument. You know where the notes are. You just feel it. You can hear it. You can hear the key. You just trust yourself that you know it. Like the
Right.
athlete trust is they know how to do that play. If they recognize the situation, they'll be able to deal with it because they practiced enough they can feel it. You
Right.
know,
I can. I commend you. I do.
this is interesting because I think a lot of times with the way the world is today, we have so many outlets that now we can be like in charge of our own work. We can self-publish like an author. Like authors can self-publish, and people can do the, indie publishing. And with a lot of creators now, we can just go on the social media and
Right.
create a TikTok, create a reel,
Right.
create a short, and suddenly without a contract, get a big buzz, get a deal, get a sync license, then get all kinds of stuff that you typically used to have to go through all these gatekeepers. So maybe you want
Right.
to talk about like in publishing, do you have like the self-publishing versus traditional? What's your point of view on that?
Well, I think you have. For me, I went with a blended matrix. I knew enough to make me dangerous, but not enough that I felt like I could quickly and efficiently produce something with quality work. And what I mean, it wasn't the writing part of it. I'm talking about the creating the cover, the
Covered all that,
editing,
yeah.
the making sure the spine's the right size, the barcode is right. And so
Hmm.
when I because originally I went with the query letters, and I had a traditional publisher, and going through the process was thinking about it, started, and I was talking to other people, and they're like, well, maybe you should self-publish, think about it. So then when I went through, I started looking at self-publishing, and then I found a company called Mindster Media.
Hmm.
And what they do is they take the hand of the author, and they're the publisher, and they do all the publishing, but they also help with the marketing aspect of it.
Okay, so it's like a
And so,
hybrid.
yeah, so it's a hybrid. And what it did for me, because I still have to teach, I still have to do my academic research,
Yeah, you
it
still have
allowed me to
100%
learn
time.
the process, right? While I learned the process while they were putting the things in place for me.
Hmm. Yeah, we
And
do
that
that with
worked for me.
publishers and
Yeah,
distributors, and
right,
sometimes you have to like, how do I get it onto Spotify? How do I
right,
get it onto iTunes? How do I get it onto Amazon? Well, you gotta go through a distributor, right? So
right,
a lot of us will still own our masters, and we'll own our copyrights.
right,
We'll own the royalty structure, but we'll make sure we have 100% royalties and we're not working with like a label, but we give up some of it, some pieces of the control to
Right.
get into the distribution networks.
Right. And so for me, that worked the best. And they were very professional. They met all terms of, the contract. I met my terms of the contract. And then as we got to the end of the journey, where they're like, okay, it's time to distribute, they said, you know what, we really think you need to query Merrill Hemingway. I'm like, why would I query Merrill Hemingway? Why would she be interested in a small? It went back to that vulnerability that we
Mhm.
talked about. Why would she be interested in a book from Indiana, from a small town girl, first debut author? They said because she's all about life balance and mental health. And every one of my characters, I put them through the DSM assessment for who they are. That's
Mhm.
one of my very first things that I do for when I create my characters. I go, okay, if they were going to go to a doctor, how would they explain themselves? And then I'd go through every body part and everything about them. And then I said, okay, what would the doctor really think or see about them? And then, because, we're not always completely 100% honest, in our
Mhm.
own intuitive being about ourselves. And then if they went to a psychiatrist, because we all have challenges, what are their positive and negative characteristics? And so I sent that letter, and she was very gracious, and she immediately wrote back and said she would love to write the foreword for it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes. So, sometimes you find the partners that work for you and
Yeah,
with
yeah,
you. They knew, had I picked someone that if someone said, oh, maybe you need to get someone to write the forward, I would have picked a school teacher, which would be great. Um, or I would have, if they said they'll go higher than that, go to Hollywood, I would have probably said, well, maybe I needed someone like Tori Spelling, or,
yeah,
someone that's in the suspense genre. But what they did is they knew my work.
yeah. They knew how to read it, and they knew who was more. Sometimes it's having that expertise, like why you go to a producer, why you do a recording engineer, why do you go to a distributor or a booker or musicians? Like at a booker, they can get you into New York or get you
Mm-hmm.
into LA or get you into
Right,
like Europe or Asia into touring. Like, well, that's why you go with them because like
right,
I can be like be a independent musician, but if I can't book, I still need a booker. Like
right,
most of the time, you might be independent, but you still have like an agent or a booker that gets you into those places because they are the ones that know how to get in there. And so that you go with their expertise.
and then that expertise you learn through that. And see, that's something that's very hard for anybody, whether it be academics, business, or music. You have to be able to take that feedback, and that's one of the hardest things
Yeah, it's
to
a
hear.
vulnerability.
You have to be able to take that feedback because you don't improve.
Yeah,
You don't realize what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And so understand that uh, you may not like what you hear, or you may not even 100% agree with it, but listen and then tweak what you're doing to be able to, you know, improve yourself. So I know, I've gone back to my second novel that's going to come out next year, and I've changed things based on what I've learned in the process.
hmm,
Not because I'm sold out or anything, but I realized certain things about my writing that would make it stronger
yeah. I
and
think
make it more relatable. And th- life is about a total growth process at all times, and finding harmony not only in what you're doing, but understanding that to grow, you have to listen.
there's a
And
lesson learned, because then you have beta readers, you have
Mhm.
editors, you have people who give you feedback. In music, we have places like SoundCloud is kind of our beta area.
Right.
If we, as a musician, we can throw a lot of demos on the SoundCloud, and then we can watch. And what's cool about it is like it's like beta listeners because they go
Okay.
in and they actually will make comments on certain points in your song. They
Oh,
can go
that's
into like
good.
2 minutes and 30 seconds on your song and write a comment. And
Oh,
so
that's wonderful.
we get a lot of really cool feedback from really dedicated people who like to listen to new music. So
Right.
this is like a place where there's a lot of underground people, the people on the kind of bleeding edge, and then there's listeners who like to listen to this stuff that's not in the top 100, and they
Right.
give really effective feedback. And then
Right.
sometimes then you kind of know if you throw a lot of your stuff out there, say, okay, these songs are really getting a lot of plays, they're getting a lot of good feedback. I can actually then take this one and then push this for publishing.
Right.
So we learn how to have these kind of areas where we can throw it at the wall and then see what the feedback is, and we learn, it's a lesson learned,
Right.
every time you put something out there. You can take it or leave it, because that way I know somebody can give you feedback, say, I really like what I'm doing here, and they don't see the full picture because it's part of an album, and so they might not realize that that piece actually works in the context of another piece, but
Right.
by itself it doesn't. And so it's like,
Right.
okay, I can understand that, but I'm still using it.
That's great that you, because beta, that's one thing that's very important in writing is the beta reader. And so it's great that musicians, and that's a new little tidbit for me that people have that ability to do the same thing in real time like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, I
Technology.
mean, yeah, with the old world, you don't give it to your producer, or your friends, and you send them a tape and you ask them what they think. But now you can get thousands of people, if
Right.
like tens of thousands of people, to give you their honest assessment, and you can take it or leave it because you don't know. If you're doing something really different, you might have a different feedback.
Right.
But if it's just a cool thing to be able to get things out in the world, and
Right.
get people to at least you know not just be haters but be productive listeners,
Right.
which is like, I guess in a beta reader you want somebody to say, well, I hated it, like, well, that's not really constructive. It's like, tell me something that's going to help me.
Right.
So,
Exactly. Right. Or, get, give some kind of feedback. Like I recently read a first chapter of a memoir that someone was writing, and it was the most humorous, dialogue that I'd heard. It was, and I don't want to give it away for them, but that, I could tell. I could say, okay, wait a minute, this part right here, just the transition's just a little too quick. It, changed too quick, or
mhm.
and you can really help each other
Yeah.
by being honest, because you don't
Hmm.
want someone that just, oh yeah, it's great, and then it
Yeah. Yeah.
sucks.
What's the point of that? Yeah, there's no point in saying something's great because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Like, I really want a real opinion, and say, like,
Right, and you can give opinions without shredding the ego.
yeah, it
You
doesn't
know,
have to
and
be the red mark of your high school teacher saying, like, this is terrible. Just
right.
red mark the whole thing and just like make me not want to write again,
Yeah,
versus
I was,
tell
like
me
I
the
said,
right way.
yeah, I wasn't academically strong, so I got a lot of those red marks. And I found it was my senior year, well, my junior year actually, that a teacher that for whatever reason she felt for me. And believe it or not, it was in English, because I went to a private school and you had to pass an English proficiency test or you couldn't graduate.
Hmm.
And she knew I was struggling to pass, and so she said, I'm going to tutor you. And we spent that whole summer of between my junior and senior year, and she tutored me. And she then, at the end, I went to go pay her because my one of my first jobs was at Arby's. And I went to go pay her, and she said, you don't owe me a thing, just pass.
That's awesome. Well, that's
Yeah.
what I love about teachers. You have a teacher that really like feels something, like, rather than actually build like love for the art. Like, if you get
Right.
somebody, like, this happens in mathematics a lot. Like, I had some teachers that were really cool and
Right.
got me into math, but there's a lot of teachers that just like just kill people, right? In terms of like they just make it like, well, I can't even do it. But so the whole point to me is like if you're a teacher and you make 90% of their class feel like they can't do calculus, well, then you're not actually a good teacher because you should try to get the kids to want to do it. So you
Oh,
should
yeah,
find a way to get them into it. Like,
right,
so I had teachers that showed me the connection between the algorithms and like video games.
right,
And when they showed me like, oh, these algorithms actually cause this to happen in the video game. And
right,
then you actually could see like, oh, if I learn how this physics calculation works, I can actually make my video game respond to getting hit. And
right,
then I actually understand, oh, that's how that applies. But if you put stuff in you, nobody understands why this applies. But you start to show people, and I had some really cool teachers that showed me how it applied in the real world.
right.
Which I think is what's missing from some academics is they don't want you to. It's like, well, just passing 10% of the class isn't it shouldn't be the goal.
No, you want them to, you really want someone to be able to apply it and be successful. And I think that that's, something that, and know where they're at. It doesn't matter whether it's academics or whether it's a leadership of an organization. One of the things that I tell my clients is you need to know where your workforce is at mentally, emotionally, in their homes, because no reward system, no motivation, no program is going to work if you don't what's going on the floor. Whether
Mhm.
it be, when you do a project in your technology, I'm sure you have to map out every process, and the leadership needs to know that. And one of the examples I always give is people want to come up with these grandiose rewards programs. Oh, you can get them gift cards for Ruth Chris, or you could, that isn't necessarily going to motivate the person that's struggling to feed their kids or
Yeah,
get
yeah.
their car fixed, or you know going through some real trauma in their life. And so you've got to know what's going on to build that rewards. Give them their birthday off. Celebrate them for doing a
Yeah,
good job.
give them time because that's the one thing in American workforce is like time is something that people don't think of. It's like, well, you should just put all the time in. Like, so if you reward people with like days off or vacation days, that can be very useful because a lot of people were doing like 2, 3 jobs.
Right,
You give them a little time, it gives them breathing space, it gives them a little bit of room. And, I think sometimes it's like not understanding, like you said, like not having empathy
right,
for who's on the floor because maybe you're not in that place, but you
right,
don't understand. You don't remember when maybe you were in that place. It's like so
right,
so like it's better if you get those people to start to want to love to come to work than
right,
to wait till 5 o'clock. I can't wait till 5 to get out. If you get the person that gets passionate, then you get that kind of drive that you see like in the entrepreneurship startups. Like I've
right,
been in startups, like everybody's working 80 hours because we got a goal and we're trying to do this thing. And we're not doing it just for the overtime. We believe in what we're doing.
right.
How can you get people to want to believe in what they're doing and not just kind of just phone it in?
It's one of it. It's built in them, at an early age. Like my father would, brainwashed me that work is good. Not everybody is raised with work is good. The other thing too is you have to, like you said, engage the person as an individual, to empower them that they have a decision, or they benefit from whatever it is that they're doing, whether it's internal or external. It can be either one of them. Hopefully it's internal. And you're right, empathy is one of the biggest ones. That's one of the emotional intelligence characteristics that can be the success or failure of a leader.
Yeah, I think sometimes like that lack of empathy, people are, how many of your workers are just phoning it in
Right,
versus how many people really look up to you like you're Steve Jobs, like or you're
right,
like one of these mega entrepreneurs. They like they get people who are like, yeah, I want to work with this guy because I know he wants to do bleeding edge, cutting
Right.
edge stuff, and I'm passionate about that. And so every day I'm going in like with this belief that we're actually changing the world, that we're doing. If you
Right.
get in that kind of dynamic environment, you're like, wow, it doesn't even feel like a job. It
No.
feels like a passion. It feels like it's like my hobby, like
Right.
the thing that you do on the side. Like if your main job can be like your side gig, then you're in the right job.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Because you're not only feeling fulfilled and content, but the accomplishments mean a lot too.
Yeah.
And the failures mean a lot. You take it both ways.
Oh yeah. I mean, in these kind of entrepreneurial things, I mean, failure is the process. You know,
Right.
like most of the time when we're doing software design, we fail like 99% of the time until we get to the point where we got something that works. Right.
Right.
So it's like, but we don't look at it as like failure. It's like steps on the way to
Right.
where that, you know, prototype,
Eighty
you know,
percent of what you do may work, and 20% there's still problems. Once you
yeah,
get
I mean, yeah, it's prototypes. I mean, like we have all these prototypes, and then prototype X is the one that worked. You know, like
right,
A didn't work, B didn't work, but X actually does. And no, some of those might actually do something else. What we found is sometimes we were building all these prototypes, and it actually didn't satisfy what we wanted to do, but was something totally different that we didn't even expect.
right,
And then we say, oh well, we can use that for something else.
right,
And
exactly,
so that's an opportunity. Like, wait, you might have failed in the initial project plan, but this other thing you did, that might make the company most of the profit. And it
right,
wasn't even something that you planned on. And that's being able to take the opportunity for like when life gives you something like that and having management to know, like, oh, this is actually better than what we were doing.
right,
And then being willing to like maybe change gears because you have your ears open and your mind open, your eyes open, and to actually see it versus
right.
people who won't see it and say, "Well, that's not what we're supposed to work on." It's like, well, this is actually better than what we were doing.
And I think that that's all part of the creative process too. When you start writing or reading or working on I mean, it could be um, crocheting, it could be anything creative that you're doing. When you start out, you don't always know where it's going to finish. You might have an idea where you want it to finish, but when I know when I wrote Crossroads, what ended up happening is I thought I knew what my main message was going to be. I had it etched in my head. It was going to be about the injustices because I had been working volunteer wise in the legal system and watching crime watches and watching cases that went through the legal system. And I thought it was going to be about some of the injustices in the system, and it is in there, but the characters and the creativity process took over, like I said, and it was more about the emotions of the individuals going
Mhm.
through it because there's
Sure.
winners and losers. And whenever there's a winner and loser, there's emotions. And like I said, the three main emotions were the anger, fury, and envy. But that brings up a whole different part of the human existence.
Dynamic, yeah. Well, that becomes like why you want to read it because it draws you in. You know,
Right,
and sometimes that happens when you're doing something creative. Is like the direction you go in. It might because of this flow state thing happens, or there's like other aspect of creativity where like the idea of the muse that the
right,
Victorians used to think about is like yeah, it's like sometimes you can channel that as a
right,
creative like and you might have this you have a plan, but when you believe in the muse and you feel that you can channel as an artist, sometimes this thing comes in and it really might be in your subconscious and some of it might be out there from the universe, but like you figured out how to use it and
right.
it can come in at
Exactly.
unexpected times and hey, that's better than what I planned, but that's what happens.
And then the idea of the muse is real in creativity because it could be music, maybe for me, that I might have to turn on to get a different mental awareness going on with what I'm writing, or it could be a different scenery. Go visit the site that I want to utilize in the scene. It could be it could be reading another book. It could be research. Muses come in many different ways, but it is very real in the process because it moves you forward.
Yeah.
And it brings that emotion in you that is required for it to be an organic connection with the listener or the reader or
I
the
think,
viewer.
yeah, it feels very authentic when people like are in that flow state and it's kind of
Hmm.
coming from the muse. Doesn't feel like it's like contrived. It feels like it's like, wow, this is a real. It feels like it's like, it is just that kind of, immediacy of going with your trusting in that. And
Right,
and sometimes it's like if you try to make something too perfect or too planned out, that when these other things come in, they change your plans. It still works. It works because it feels like, life is that way where sometimes something like happens and it changes your direction.
right. And I
But
think that when things change, you have to give yourself the freedom. Sometimes, like if you write an outline or you have a thought, you have to give yourself freedom in the creative process to realize, wait a minute, this is better.
yeah, that's Devin. That happens all the time.
Yeah, this is better. Don't say, oh, but I wanted it to be this, because sometimes, yeah, that might be okay, but what you're thinking about now might be better,
Yeah,
and
it can
so give
totally
yourself
change.
that freedom to pursue the passion that's within the creative process.
Well, it always goes by quicker than we think. We're already at an hour, so that's kind of like our framework for our distributors. But I really enjoyed talking with you tonight. I want to let people know like RhondaParkerTaylor.com. That will be clickable. People should check that out. Check out all the work you're doing. You have your current novel. You're working on another one, and
Mhm.
yeah, I just think it's awesome to be able to talk to different creative people and your perspective on writing and just life is really worth for everybody to hear, and that's why we do these podcasts. So have people learn about creators' processes and their systems of how they come up with their ideas or their mindsets. And I do appreciate that you are a guest on the show tonight.
Thank you, thank you. I hope that everybody enjoyed the show, and check my website out. The book's name's Crossroads. There will be a life balance book coming soon, since it's all about life balance too. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you again. And this will be available on all podcast platforms where podcasts can be listened to or watched. We were just on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and those are live right now. And we'll give you a landing page for your audience by tomorrow. But thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.